The objectives for this session include increasing awareness and knowledge of the Migrant Education Program, or MEP, reviewing data on migratory children in Texas, understanding the importance of coordination and collaboration, identify best practices for collaboration, and identifying opportunities for coordination and collaboration between the MEP and other programs to maximize services for migratory children. The Title I Part C program, also known as the Migrant Education Program, is a federal program. Title I Part C, as amended, authorizes grants to states to establish or improve directly or through local operating agencies programs of education for migratory children. The Code of Federal Regulation provides applicable regulations related to the Migrant Education Program. And the non-regulatory guidance provides guidance to states and local operating agencies or local education agencies in the use of funds and implementation of supplemental educational and support services to assist migratory children. The Texas Migrant Education Program MEP grant recipients must operate and implement the program in accordance with all the provisions and assurances of Title I Part C. Some of the key program requirements include the LEA's responsibility for incorporating all MEP activities, services, plans, and guidelines into a migrant-specific section of the District Improvement Plan, or DIP, and updating it on a yearly basis. MEP activities shall address the identified and unique educational needs of migratory children that result from the migratory lifestyle, and to permit these children to participate effectively in school, and addressing the unique educational needs of migratory children that are not addressed by services available from other federal and non-federal programs. And in providing services with Title I Part C funds, the LEA shall give priority to serving priority for service of PFS migratory children with MEP funds before using migrant funds to address the needs of other migratory children. Now, priority for service will be addressed later in this session. Migrant student data collection and data entry into the New Generation System, or NGS, which is a migrant student database. Provide for advocacy and outreach activities for migratory children and their families. To promote parental participation, provide information regarding family literacy, coordinate with available program offering options for credit accrual and recovery, coordinate and collaborate with sending and receiving districts and states, and conduct a program evaluation.
Hello everyone, my name is Nes Paniagua and I will be providing you a background on the Texas Migrant Education Program. Well, first things first, who is a migratory student? Now, we know that there are many of you who are experts in the migrant program, but for the benefit of those who are new, we're going to give you a quick overview of who is a migratory student, because in order to serve these students, we have to know who they are. So in a nutshell, migratory students are children ages birth through 21 who are entitled to a free public education through grade 12 in the state, and who have not graduated from high school or obtained a high school equivalency certificate. These children had to have moved due to economic necessity, either as a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, or with a migrant worker, or to join a parent, guardian, or spouse who is a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. As you can tell, these are highly mobile students. Once a student has been identified as a migratory student, that student retains that eligibility for 36 months. In the migrant program, we use a tool called the Certificate of Eligibility to document the status of a student as migratory. And that, in a nutshell, is who is a migratory student. One thing with the migrant program is that we're very data heavy. So what does that data tell us about the program and about the population that we serve? As you can see, here in Texas, we have seen a decrease in the number of identified migratory students in the state for the past few years. In the graph that we're seeing right now, it goes back to 2016, 2017. And at that time, we had 30,947 students identified in the state. From then on, and actually before that, we have seen a decrease of about 2,000 to 4,000 students every year, and that trend continues. Something to notice is that these trends are not just specific to Texas. This is something that we have seen nationwide. The migrant population in the country has decreased. We have seen an increase of single males engaging in agricultural work and engaging in these migratory patterns and not necessarily moving with their families. So that will cause a decrease in the number of migratory students. Another thing is we are also having a reliance on H2 and H1 visas for this type of work. Again, if these workers do not come with their families, we cannot serve their students unless the worker is under the age of 21 and they have not graduated from high school. So those are some of the challenges that we have. Again, these are trends that have been happening for years now and that reflect throughout the country. So that being said, here in Texas, and I know countrywide, but here in Texas, we continue to emphasize in the need to identify the students because we know that before we can serve them, we have to know who the students are. So we are working very hard with the ESCs and with the LEAs, and we do try to provide new tools and resources that facilitate the recruitment and first the identification and the recruitment of migratory students into the program. Another graph that we would like to share with you is this one will tell you the number of eligible migratory students identified in Texas in the blue bar, and the orange bar will tell you the number of identified migrant students who are served by the MEP. As you can see, we actually have decreased that gap between eligible students and served students, and that is something that we're very proud. We know that you guys at the ESC and at the LEA level work very hard to serve our students. One thing is identifying them, but the other thing is serving them. So as you can see, throughout the years, we actually have decreased that gap significantly. And that is all due to the hard work of all the migrant education programs at every level in the state. So we do want to thank you for that, because this graph reflects the hard work that you guys are putting in serving our students. Now we would like to highlight the areas where the largest concentration of migratory families can be found in the state. 55% of the Texas migratory student population reside on ESC 1, which is in the Rio Grande Valley. Again, this is where most of our families are, and this is the big sending area. But additionally, we also have large concentration of migratory families in Region 4, which is in Houston, Region 20, San Antonio, Region 16, Amarillo, Region 17, Lubbock, and Region 19, El Paso. As you know, Texas is a big sending state, and we will be talking about that more in the next slide. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Texas is a big sending state. That means that we send families to work in other states more than what we receive from other states. Throughout the years, Texas families really move all over the place. We do have even families that move to Alaska to engage in migratory work. That being said, the majority of our families tend to stick to the Midwestern states. That's where the traveling patterns usually follow. As an example that we can give you is for the past year, and this is the 1920 school year. This is the number of migratory children who were identified in other states coming from Texas. For the state of Michigan, we had 2,269 students. For Minnesota, we had 2,623 students. North Dakota, and this is a new one, we had 805 students. Illinois, 610, and Indiana, 701. As you can see, most of these states are in the Midwest. And one of the reasons is that these are big agricultural states. Another example is California, and we actually have a large number as well. I believe it's about 605 students that were identified from Texas and California. But California also employs a lot of families within the state of California to work in their agricultural fields. Again, Texas also has agricultural fields, and as many of you will know, especially in the rural areas, we do have families that move within the state. But by far, the largest number of migratory students are identified because they travel with their families out of the state of Texas. So why is it important to identify the priority for service students within the migratory population of your students at the district level? And the reason is because we know that migratory students face a lot of obstacles and challenges because of the nature of their migratory lifestyle. So what are some of the impacts of being a migratory student? So due to the mobile nature of migratory work, migratory children often experience difficulty receiving a continuous and high quality education. So what does that entitle? We know that our families, migratory families, constantly move, but we also know that they follow the cycles of nature for most of the time. That means that we have families that leave before the end of the school year. A lot of our families start leaving the school, their home bases or the school district where their children reside here in Texas around the start of the spring cycle. So around, you might start seeing your families leaving your districts around March, April, May, and the summer for sure. So this creates difficulties because there might not be that continuity of education, especially if the families end up leaving the state. We know that there's challenges when it comes to enrolling their children in the new schools. There are challenges dealing with correct placement and giving the correct credit for the classes that they're taking. So that's where the continuity and high quality educational services for migratory students, the challenge lies. The other thing is they face difficulty enrolling in school. We know that there are certain requirements for enrolling your child, and the fact is that a lot of our families have difficulty either providing those documents, or once the child is being enrolled in the district, they might not be placed in the correct grade or be given the credit that they have earned in the previous school, whether that means that they're coming from Texas or if they're coming from other states and they're enrolling in a Texas school, they might not be given the correct placement. We also know that migratory students experience inappropriate educational placements due to lack of school records and other documentation, and I already covered that. They suffer educational disruption and loss of academic credit due to varying curricula in different school districts and states. We know that Texas's curriculum is very different from other states. So there is challenges, and we do understand that that's a challenge for districts as well, because you guys have to figure out, well, the curriculum doesn't match what we have here in our district when it comes from another state or even another district. So that is a challenge for both the students and the districts. But we do have services and tools within the migrant education program that can assist in that transition. One of those tools is the Texas TMIP, the Texas Migratory Interstate program. They can provide assistance when it comes to placement or making sure that the students receive the correct credit for classes that they take in other districts or states. We also know that there's cultural and language barriers. A large majority of our migrant families are of Hispanic descent. That doesn't mean that all migratory students are Hispanic. It's just a large majority. But we do have migratory students that can be any ethnic or racial group. So we know that there's cultural and language barriers sometimes, especially whenever dealing with Hispanic migratory students, especially the ones that are children of immigrants. We know that the population of migratory workers, I believe, is at least 50% undocumented, so that there is barriers on that. So the children face a constant change. We know how hard moving can be for a student. Now imagine moving to a completely different country or moving to a state that is different from where they had already settled, because we know that children can adapt, but imagine having to move constantly. And our migratory families move almost on a yearly basis because that is their livelihood. We know that they follow the cycles of nature, so they had to move at the beginning of the spring and summer season, and then they work all the way through the fall, and right until about the end of the fall, right before winter starts, they start moving southwards, because we know that the growing season, depending on where in the country can be, it depends on the time of the year and how the climate is. So we know the growing season ends a lot sooner in the northern states, but it can continue in the southern states. Another challenge that migratory students face is social isolation. Imagine having to move constantly. Can you really develop those friendships, those relationships with the student-teacher relationships that we know are so beneficial to students? It's hard to develop those if you don't stay in a place constantly. If you have to constantly move from one place to another, it's hard to develop those relationships, and that affects the life of migratory students. Also, there are health-related problems. Again, our migratory families often face economic challenges. That means that they don't have easy access to medical coverage. They might not have insurance, or they might not be able to afford to go see a doctor where they reside. Now imagine if they had to move to a completely new place. Often they don't identify health problems that could be prevented with early care. And that is a challenge. The other thing is our migratory families work in the fields. That means that they're exposed to all kinds of things like pesticides and other toxics that can affect, and we know that it affects their health and affects the health of their children. So our migratory families often face health-related problems. Also, there is lack of resources in the areas which they live and work. Most of our families end up moving to rural areas. And one of the challenges, and this is something that you guys, especially our districts that are rural districts, face regardless whether or not they're dealing with migratory families or not. There is a lack of resources, sadly, in our rural areas. There's often not enough health, mental health, assistance with housing or food or anything. Sadly, is very limited. Often these fall on local churches or local organizations, but the funding is limited. So there is a lack of resources, and that can affect the way that our families are served and affect how we meet their needs.
The Office of Migrant Education has identified the following as the most common areas of concern that address most migratory children. We ask that you keep these areas in mind as you consider opportunities for coordination and collaboration. Educational continuity, instructional time, school engagement, English language acquisition, educational support in the home, health, and access to services. Priority for service. Who are the children that should be given priority for service in the migrant education program? State education agencies and local education agencies must prioritize specific migratory children when providing MEP-funded services. Migratory children with priority for services are those who made a qualifying move within the previous 1 year period and are failing or at most risk of failing to meet the challenging state academic standards or have dropped out of school. How are the PFS children identified? After data on these students is entered into the New Generation System, or NGS, which is a Texas Migrant Student Database, the students in grades 3rd through 12th grade, ungraded, or out-of-school youth are flagged as PFS if they have made a qualifying move to qualify for the MEP in the previous 1 year period and have received a grade level of approaches or not meet on the STAR assessment, were absent, not tested, or were not enrolled in a Texas school during the state assessment testing period for their grade level. For grades K through 3rd, the PFS children are the students who made a qualifying move within the previous 1-year period and have been designated as LEP in the student designation section of the NGS Supplemental Program component, or for grades K through 2nd, students who have been retained or overage for their current grade. In 2018-2019, 87% of PFS children were served. In addition, 79% of all migratory children were served during the performance period. 65% were served during the regular year, 14% served during the summer, 48% received instruction, and 75% received support services.
So we talked about all the challenges that our migratory families face, and as you can see, is plenty. But also now let's try to look at these challenges as a possibility or an opportunity to serve them. So what are some of the possible services? And Idalia is going to be covering some of the possible services that we have within the migrant education program.
Services for migratory children. Services are a subset of all allowable activities that the MEP can provide through its programs and projects. Services are those educational and educationally related activities that directly benefit a migratory child, that address a need of a migratory child consistent with the SEA's Comprehensive Needs Assessment and Service Delivery Plan, are grounded in scientifically based research, or in the case of support services, are generally accepted practice, and are designed to enable the programs to meet its measurable program outcomes and contribute to the achievement of the state's performance targets. Let's take a minute to differentiate between instructional services and support services. Instructional services are MEP-funded instruction in a subject area provided for students on a regular or systemic basis, usually for a predetermined period of time. Support services are MEP-funded educationally related services that are provided to students. Now let's take a look at some possible supplemental services for migratory students. Possible supplemental instructional services available for eligible migratory students P3 through kindergarten, which is H3 through kindergarten. Center-based literacy programs for 3- and 4-year-olds. A Bright Beginning, which is the state-supported early literacy program. Home-based programs for 3- and 4-year-olds. A Bright Beginning as well. Supplemental instructional support by a teacher for migrant pre-kindergarten and kindergarten students who are performing below the expected level of development, and collaborate with parents on ways to support students' skill development at home. Some possible supplemental instructional services available for eligible migratory students in grades 1st through 6th grade can include extended day tutoring in core content areas before school, after school, or on Saturdays, tutoring in core content areas during the regular school day, extended day statewide student assessment tutorials before school, after school, and on Saturdays, or statewide student assessment tutorials during the regular school day. Additional possible supplemental instructional services available to eligible migratory students in grades 1st through 6th grade can also include reading instruction by a teacher, math instruction by a teacher, supplemental instructional support by a teacher for migrant 1st grade students who are performing below the expected grade level of development, and collaborate with parents on ways to support student skill development at home. Possible supplemental instructional services available for eligible migratory students in grades 6th through 12th can include extended day tutoring in core content areas before school, after school, or on Saturdays, tutoring in core content areas during the regular school day, extended day, statewide student assessment tutorials before school, after school, and on Saturdays, and statewide student assessment tutorials during the regular school day. Other possible supplemental instructional services available for eligible migratory students in grades 6 through 12 include reading instruction by a teacher, math instruction by a teacher, supplemental instructional services to ensure migratory students are proficient on the state assessments, migrant extracurricular clubs or leadership organizations specific to migratory secondary students who meet regularly and designated to help students resolve issues and problems related to late entry and/or early withdrawal, provide leadership opportunities, and facilitate social engagement with the school community. Another supplemental service for migratory children is advocacy. MEP services as advocacy that are provided to migratory students to ensure that they receive non-MEP funded instructional and support services can include coordination with a classroom teacher to ensure that the migratory students receive the needed interventions, coordination with a program such as 21st Century to ensure that migratory students receive needed support to be able to participate, and coordination with a community agency to provide needs-based services to a migratory student. Another very important service that the Migrant Education Program can provide is support services for migrant parents. Some possible support services available for eligible migrant parents can include childcare during parent involvement activities and parent advisory council meetings, light snacks to encourage participation or attendance by parents at parent involvement activities and PAC meetings, registration for state and/or national workshops and conferences, and outreach activities to inform out-of-school youth and their parents about available educational options. Now let's take a look at some possible supplemental support services available for the eligible migratory students. This can include clothing, school supplies, vision screenings, hearing screenings, or other health support services specified by the district. So now that we've had the opportunity to get to know who the migrant student is, the data, and what are some possible supplemental services, we want to take an opportunity to really talk about how can we ensure that supplemental part of the program by collaboration and coordination in order to maximize the services for the migratory students, specifically the PFS students. Why is coordination important in the Migrant Education Program? The state and its LEAs must have a plan that ensures that the special educational needs of the migratory children, including preschool migratory children and migratory children who have dropped out of school, are identified and addressed through full range of services that are available to them from appropriate local, state, and federal educational programs. Joint planning among local, state, and federal educational programs serving migratory children, including language instruction educational programs under Part A, Title III, the integration of services available under this part with the educational services provided by other programs, and measurable program objectives and outcomes. Why is coordination with other federal programs important and necessary? In general, MEP funds are to be used to address the needs of migratory children that are not addressed by other federal and non-federal programs. For example, Title I Part A, LEAs must ensure that eligible migrant children receive Title I Part A services on the same basis as other eligible children in school-wide programs and targeted assistance programs. And LEAs must coordinate and integrate Title I Part A services with programs that serve migrant children. One very important thing to keep in mind is that by coordinating with other programs, SEAs and LEAs can ensure that the needs of migratory children are met through a variety of sources in a way that leverages other program funds and optimizes the use of MEP funds. Here are some key questions to consider about networking and coordination. For example, with which programs should the MEP collaborate? What can these other programs contribute to the MEP? What can the MEP offer to the other programs? What is the history of collaboration? And who are the appropriate program contacts? Some key steps in building collaboration and coordination with other programs can include becoming familiar with the other local, state, and federal programs. Determine the benefits of coordination and the anticipated result. Determine how programs can work together to meet mutually reinforced goals, objectives, and strengthen one another. Set up an introductory meeting to provide an overview of the MEP and learn about one another's programs. Most importantly, establish shared goals, timelines for collaboration. Keep those lines of communication open and resolve challenges and perceived barriers expeditiously. So what are some basic guidelines for cross-program coordination? It is important to be intentional about the coordination, to have a clear purpose, to select the programs and agencies that have the greatest potential for assisting the children and youth you work with, to be conscious about what is needed and what can be expected at each step of the partnership. Cross-program coordination can have many benefits. The following are some of the key benefits. For example, expansion of program capacity through access to resources, greater awareness of the needs of migratory children and youth in other programs, more efficient use of resources across the programs, and a greater community awareness through partnerships.
So now that we know the benefits of coordination and collaboration, let's look at an example of a student who has been identified both as migrant and homeless. So collaboration between the Migrant Education Program and the homeless program staff to serve migratory students experiencing homelessness ensures that services are provided in an efficient, non-duplicative fashion and the students receive a full range of support to meet their unique needs. By working together, the MEP and the homeless program benefit migrant students experiencing homelessness in their education and beyond by ensuring that they serve efficiently and effectively with a comprehensive array of services. So in this case, we have a student who is both migrant and homeless. So what are the things that both programs can do and provide for the student? The local migrant education program can collaborate with the homeless McKinney-Vento staff in the following way. They can provide insight on the working patterns of local migrant communities. And why is that important? Because this means that migrant local staff knows when to expect migrant families to coming into the area. We also know that a lot of our migrant families can be double up or they can live in substandard housing. That could qualify them as homeless. So that's why it's really important to have that insight and that knowledge that the migrant education program staff can provide. They understand the educational, health, emotional, and social unique needs of migratory students. Again, this is crucial because it provides an insight into the unique needs of a student that is a migratory student. They also know the location of migrant camps and communities. And why is that important? Because again, if a family is double up or they live in substandard housing, they could qualify for the McKinney-Vento program. So because migrant staff at the local level know the location of migrant camps and communities, they can collaborate with the homeless program to ensure that there is that identification. Also, they can provide referral of migrant students who are experiencing homelessness. So once a student has been identified and recruited into the program, the migrant program, and if the migrant staff is aware that this student could qualify for the McKinney-Vento, they can refer it to the McKinney-Vento program. They can provide contact and communicate with migrant families in the native language if necessary. A lot of our migrant staff is either bilingual or they're able to communicate in Spanish because, again, a large portion of our migratory population is Spanish speaking. So they can provide that communication and form a connection between the families and the McKinney-Vento program. They can also provide a contact and communicate with migrant employers. This may result in cooperation with identifying children who may be covered by the McKinney-Vento Act in posting information publicly about the act. So why is that important? Because we know in the migrant education program that collaboration and cooperation with employers is crucial, because we need that cooperation with the farmers, with the ranchers, with anybody who's employing our migratory workers, for our recruiters to go into these job sites and recruit families, but also post information about the program. So the migrant education program at the local level can provide that contact and provide that assistance between the employer and the homeless program at the district. So what are some of the things that the local homeless program can provide for migratory staff and for migratory students? So homeless programs can provide MEP staff with the following: guidance in determining which migrant students are eligible for the McKinney-Vento services according to the definition of homeless. We're all experts in our area, but that collaboration and cooperation is necessary because our migrant staff might not necessarily know the definitions and what is required for a student to be eligible for McKinney-Vento services. So that's why it's necessary to have that collaboration, and it's a back and forth because we know the definitions and the criteria to identify a student as migrant is very intricate and is something that might not be knowledgeable by other programs. So it's good to have that communication and that collaboration. Also, understanding of the provisions of the McKinney-Vento Act in ways that it may be used to provide services, including immediate school enrollment, school stability, to eligible migrant children. So if a child is migratory and homeless, they can provide those services through McKinney-Vento. Assistance with accessing supports available through Title I Part A homeless set-aside funds, knowledge of the community referral resources, including providers of health, mental health, housing, and basic services. Again, it's important to have that communication between both programs because we might be able to better serve these students that are identified both as homeless and migratory.